So we hear it again for Kim Archer. So this year we're on a transformational journey, and the transformational journey calls you to step out in ways and step up in ways that you hadn't done before, perhaps to discover talents and gifts within yourself that you didn't know that you had, to go outside of your comfort zone. And last week we talked about going beyond labels, and I want to let you know that we haven't let go of that conversation. And again, this conversation continues with Michael Bogar on Wednesday nights in July, turning labels into archetypes, I think is the title, stereotypes into archetypes. So that'll be a great class. So the transformational journey also calls for us to set the ego aside and serve. So today, we're focusing on those who have dedicated themselves to service. So we've already had our chaplain dedication, our 17 years of chaplains, and last week they went on their retreat, and as you know, they have recommitted to being chaplains for another year, which means they'll be here on Sunday to pray with you. They'll call you if you would like that at home to offer prayer. And recognizing that whatever you tell a chaplain stays in confidence, that you can trust that any prayer said, anything said is held in sacred space. And that is also probably one of the main purposes that the prayer chaplains are here, and that is to hold sacred space. And what does it mean to hold sacred space? It means that when we're praying together, we recognize that there's a third, right? That it's the Spirit of God that dwells within each of us, and it is that Spirit that comes forth in holding that sacred space. So beyond what the duties are of a prayer chaplain, I think there's also an energy that is created, a foundational energy that spills out into the rest of the community, into the rest of the church, and it kind of grounds us and holds us and keeps us in that sacred space, as do all of you who serve on the prayer team. And so I am grateful for this energy that continues. And the players change, but that energy remains the same. And it's the same energy, not only that this church is built on, but it is also the same energy that the unity movement is built on. Because Myrtle Fillmore, the prayer chaplains are a continuation of what Myrtle Fillmore started over 100 years ago, when she used to have people come and sit in a circle in her living room, and she would hold prayer meetings and she would hold healing meetings, and it just kind of grew into this unity movement. So we're grateful for the continuation of this process and for this service. We are also honoring today Lewis Mason, who has served in the Sunday school for over 3 decades. Now just get your head around that for a minute. And he will be up here at the end of the service so that you can thank him and we can present him with a gift. He has been creative in his form of teaching, and he's been a favorite of the kids over the years. I know he's my children's favorite teacher, and it wasn't unusual to see him with costumes and props, and he's watched so many of our little children grow into adults. And he's been a steady and supportive presence to them. And isn't that what community is, right? To kind of be that stable source of seeing and holding the spiritual sacred place for our kids. So to be on the transformative journey is to engage in selfless service. So what does that mean, selfless service? When we say selfless, it's a capital S, the self. So the self is the Spirit of God. It's that presence. It's the soul. It's the God within us. And when we are engaging in selfless service, we are allowing that entire presence to show up as God in work and in service. So selfless service means to serve without thought about how one will be rewarded. It is a spiritual practice that takes the ego out of the equation. And master spiritual teachers have shown us this and talked about this for thousands of years, and currently are teachers. And of course, Jesus was a master self-server. And he demonstrated this when he washed the feet of the disciples. And I know I share this story every Maundy Thursday and around that time of year, but it's really a big part of his teaching. So the night before he's crucified, he knows that he's about ready to leave, and the disciples are vying for who's going to be in charge, right? You know, they want to be his right-hand man. It's like, they're kind of like puffing up and showing themselves that, hey, Jesus, I'm up for the task. You want to put me in charge. I know what's going on. And so at the supper, he bows down and washes their feet. Now, remember, in these times, everybody's wearing sandals. Their feet are pretty dirty, maybe a little smelly. And it's usually the servant who would come and wash your feet, right? And so for him to do this is like he's really putting himself beneath everybody. And he gets down on his knees and he starts washing the disciples' feet. And of course, Peter is like, oh, no way, you're not washing my feet. I'm not going to let you humble yourself and be a servant to me. And then that's when Jesus said, fine, you know what? If I can't wash your feet, then I don't want any part of you. And Peter says, well then, wash my hair, give me a shower. I'm here, I'm in, totally. So he washes the feet of all 12 disciples. And then afterwards he says to them, do you know what I've done? Do you know what I've done for you? Because you call me rabbi, you call me Lord and teacher, and yeah, that's true, I am. But I am also here to serve, and no one is greater than another. And that's the message that he was so clearly trying to get across to the disciples before he left. So it doesn't matter what kind of work you do, whether you're serving customers food, or you're teaching a class, or you're washing a window, or you're running a meeting. When it is done as an act of selfless service, it leads to transformation. My first job was as a cashier at a grocery store. And, when you go to work, it's like, I gotta go to work, right? And there is that attitude that we can have when we have to go to work. It's like, I gotta go to work. Or it's like, I get to go serve. And I know for me that when I worked at the grocery store, that if I engaged with every customer that came through, then my day just flew by. Didn't even notice. It was like, 7 hours went by. But when I was like, looking at the clock and wanting to get out of there and not being fully present to where I was, the time dragged on. Anybody have this experience? I remember my daughter, she actually didn't get her first job until she was probably 18 or 19 when she was in college, because she was an athlete. So that was her job, was to do sports. And she got a job at the Coeur d'Alene Hotel, and she was a pool girl, bringing out towels and stuff. And she called me up and she goes, Mom, I'm so bored. I feel like I'm going to die. I have to put the towels out. I have to do this. And I look at the clock and I go, Caroline, why do you think they call it work? She likes her job now. She's teaching kids. But Jesus also gave us advice when he said this in the book of Matthew. He said, when you give to the poor, do not sound trumpets before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, so that they may be honored by men. Truly I say that they have received their reward. But when you give to the poor, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving will be in secret, and your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. This is the definition of selfless service. Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. In other words, when we show up to serve, we're not looking for accolades, we're not looking for money, we're not looking for thank yous, we're looking to simply be a servant of spirit. So this is the definition of selfless service. And I love when he says, your giving will be in secret, and your Father or Mother God, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. And how are you going to be rewarded? I think miraculous things happen. So no cameras, no thank yous, no awards. The reward is transformation. So how does this show up in our lives as transformation? How does this work? So Edwene Gaines, who's a Unity Prosperity teacher, and she wrote the book, The 4 Spiritual Laws of Prosperity. It's a class that we just did. It's in the bookstore. And she was a teacher, seminars, consultant, all that. And in the 70s, she moved to Kansas City to go to ministerial school. And she thought, here I am, everybody. I have arrived. And I want to share with you directly what she said, because she contacted all the churches, and she's saying, I'm here, hello. She said, I was annoyed that no one wanted my services. I continued to offer my brilliance, but no one threw down the welcome mat the way I thought they would. So I prayed about it. And what was happening was there were all these ministerial students from all over the country, and they were all offering up. So her guidance told her that she should contact the church nearest her and ask how she can serve. So she called the church nearest her and said, hi, I'm in ministerial school, what can I do? And the minister says, well, what I really need is somebody to come in on Saturdays and mop the floors. And then I need somebody to come in Sunday early in the morning and make the coffee and fold the bulletins. And she says, I can do that, she said. And I did. Every Saturday and every Sunday, I would mop the floor, fold the bulletins, and make the coffee. I did it week after week after week after week. And nobody ever said thank you. Nobody even noticed that I was doing it. But the funny thing that happened was that the more I did it, the more I began to love doing it. And as time passed, I began to find more and more things that needed doing, like putting toilet paper in the bathrooms or making sure the cobwebs were off the ceiling fans. You get the idea. So she's doing this, and she says, and she's in this flow. And one day, the minister called early in the morning and said, Edwene, I am really sick, and I have laryngitis. Would you mind teaching the adult education class this morning, and then would you mind speaking at the Sunday service? And Edwene was like, sure. And she said that this was something that she did not expect. I never expected to actually do a church service. I just wanted to teach a little class, but what happens is that when you show the universe that you really mean that you are here to serve, and not just get your name in lights and get all the glory, but you're really here to serve from a heart space that says, God, I really want this world to work for everyone, then the universe knows that you're finally ready, right? Your giving will be in secret, and your Father, Mother God, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. So, what are some of the ways that you find yourself serving? And is there a spot in your life maybe where you're stuck? Because the truth is, if we find that we're stuck, then maybe we need to show up in a place of service. Swami Sivananda believed that selfless service is the key to enlightenment. He said, hold your life for the service of others. The more energy you spend in elevating and serving others, the more divine energy will flow to you. The more the divine energy will flow to you. This was his main message. And perhaps if we exchange the word work for service, instead of I'm going to work, I'm going to serve, right? When I was living in the ashram, we always were serving. That's just what we did because it was part of the practice. And I'll never forget my brother came to visit, and I was asking him if he wanted to go over to Nassau, and we had this boat, this little old rickety boat, and we had to untie it and do all this stuff. And he said, why would you want to do that? That's so much work. And I was like, No, it's service. It's fun. We're going to get in the boat and go. And I realized that I had changed my thinking around the idea of work versus the idea of service. And obviously, churches, spiritual communities, schools are wonderful places. We give you lots of opportunity to practice selfless service. As an usher greeter, serving on the prayer team, on the board of trustees, teaching Sunday school for 3 decades. There are thousands of ways that one can enter in and practice selfless service. And of course, probably for me, the number one is parenthood, right? I mean, you step into parenthood and work with children, and selfless service takes on a whole new meaning. So many years ago, I attended what was called a centering prayer workshop, a book based on the works of Basil Pennington. And we spent 4 days, I guess, in prayer and asking the question, who are you and why are you here? Big stuff. But the side benefit to the workshop was that there were people in the back of the room that would watch us, and they were there to serve us, the participants. So they would watch and see if you needed a cup of tea or another coffee or a snack, and it was like you would even put your cup down, and before you even did it, someone was there with another cup of coffee for you. And I found that was like this much of the workshop, right? And then it came to Seattle, so I had the opportunity to be one of the people in the back of the room. And so I sat in the back of the room and I just watched, and I waited for someone to need coffee or to need tea, and I jumped on it instantly. And I have to tell you, it was so enriching. It was so fun. It was a spiritual practice of this willingness and this engagement in service. It was done with such love and care that when I received it, I received so much and was able to give that back. And again, as Sivananda said, the more energy you spend in elevating and serving others, the more the divine energy will flow through you. So again, what's calling you? What is it you're doing now? And are you doing it in the idea of service? Khalil Gibran said it this way. He said, "You work that you may keep pace with the earth and the soul of the earth, for to be idle is to become a stranger to the seasons. When you work, you are a flute whose heart the whispering of the hours turns to music. Always, you've been told that work is a curse and labor is a misfortune. But I say to you that when you work, you fulfill a part of earth's furthest dream. And in keeping yourself with labor, you are in truth loving life. And to love life through labor is to be intimate with life's most intimate secret. And what is it to work with love? It is to weave the cloth with threads drawn from your heart, even as if your beloved were to wear that cloth. It is to build a house with affection, even as if your beloved were to dwell in that house. It is to sow seeds with tenderness and reap the harvest with joy, even as if your beloved were to eat the fruit. It is to charge all things you fashion with a breath of your own spirit. Work is love made visible. Service is love made visible. So whether you are washing a car or babysitting or cooking a meal, do it with love and without regard for reward, because selfless service is a great spiritual law that leads to transformation. Again, as we move into this, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, because the more energy we spend in elevating and serving others, the more the divine energy flows through us. May we live this. May we have this experience not only as we show up on Monday for our jobs, but as we also are served, that we may be gifted and blessed and loved. Thank you.